That one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this edition, we're going to go through just a potpourri of things that I've kind of accumulated over the last, month or so that I find of interest, and hopefully you do too. But first, we're going to do our Texas history and little Texas discussion here. And I'm wondering, have you ever heard of the chicken salad case? Well, when I ran across this, obviously the name caught my eye, but I'd never heard of it either, if you have not. But let's dive into what that is. So, the chicken salad case was involved in the impeachment charges against James E. Ferguson in 1917. On February 11th, 1915, the 34th legislature passed a Deficiency Appropriations Act providing $2,000 a year for 2 years for expenses incurred by former Governor Oscar Branch Colquitt for fuel, lights, water, and ice for the governor's mansion, and for food, including chicken salad and punch, automobile repairs, feed, and stationery for his private use. Although Attorney General Benjamin F. Looney ruled the appropriation invalid, Ferguson signed the bill. Representative W.C. Middleton of Rains County brought suit, and on June 12, 1915, was granted a temporary injunction by Judge George Calhoun of the 53rd District Court, Austin, restraining Comptroller Henry Berryman Terrell from issuing warrants on the state treasury to cover these expenditures. On appeal by Terrell to the state Supreme Court, transferred to the Court of Civil Appeals of Texas, 4th District, San Antonio, Chief Justice William Seat Fly, in June of 1916, upheld the lower court, making the injunction perpetual in part. So basically, the court ruled that the legislature could appropriate for fuel, water, lights, and ice necessary for the governor's mansion, but not for groceries and other personal needs of the governor, which appropriation was held to be contrary to the provisions of the Constitution of 1876 on the governor's salary, casual deficiencies, and prohibition against appropriation for private purposes. Meanwhile, Ferguson continued to purchase groceries with state money under this appropriation. When questioned before the House Investigation Committee of the 35th Legislature on charges of misappropriated funds, he testified under oath that he would repay the state if the Supreme Court decided against him. But in spite of the adverse decision, he failed to do so. In September 1917, the High Court of Impeachment held that Ferguson was guilty of a misapplication of appropriations made by the legislature for fuel, lights, ice, and incidentals, and that he used the same purchase of groceries, feed, automobile, tires, and gasoline for his private use, and that his refusal to pay for these funds constituted a continued misapplication of public funds. The Court of Impeachment voted, by a vote of 25-3, removed Ferguson from office and made him ineligible to hold any office of honor, trust, or profit under the state of Texas. Now, that name Ferguson may be familiar to you because Ferguson continued to exert considerable political influence, however, through the political career of his wife, Miriam Ma Ferguson. I think that's a more, I don't know, probably more famous name for Texans here. And maybe on another podcast, we'll go through what all she was involved in. I thought that was interesting, especially in light of the current times, what's going on now. With Trump being elected, and of course he has this Doge committee, advisory committee, Department on Governmental Efficiency. This would have been probably a prime candidate for the Texas Department on Government Efficiency back in the day. No telling what kind of waste is just being perpetuated in the state government right now. I mean, it's probably just utterly out of control. However, in contrast to our federal government, which currently right now, I believe we're around $35 trillion in debt, with annual budget deficits of, $2 to $4 trillion a year, meaning spending that much more than what the federal government actually takes in. I mean, the amount of utter waste on the federal level and destruction caused by the federal government is beyond the pale and unprecedented in human history on this planet. We've long said here that the federal government is probably the most destructive force against the human race that has ever existed, and I'm not exaggerating that. I mean, just look at these stupid things that the Doge Commission is uncovering, and that's just a small tip of the annual budget of the federal government's iceberg. I mean, they're barely making a dent. It's a fly on the elephant's ass dent, maybe a mosquito on the elephant's butt is the size of what they've already identified and cut out. Can you imagine what else is out there? But I found this interesting article here in our periodical that we get at our house. I don't know if you get it there, but it's the community, the New Braunfels is where we are, the Community Impact Edition. It's good, tells you about what's going on around town and whatnot. But there's a little missive in here saying the Texas Comptroller projects $24 billion surplus as the legislative session begins this year. Wow. So imagine that. Texas has a $24 billion surplus, yet it is still connected to and held down by the chains of Mordor and D.C. God, imagine what Texas could do if it was not held back by that albatross. But the comptroller announced that in the 26-27 budget, which they always go out ahead, the budget will be about $360 billion. Okay, now. And they anticipate that having about a $24 billion surplus. Now, part of that budget is income that they're estimating to receive from the federal government, about $115 billion from the federal government. So essentially what happens is the federal government steals property and money from the citizens of Texas, and what it does is it turns around and bribes the state government of Texas with its own money, sending it back here. Now it says, of course, there are strings attached. It has to be spent on Medicaid and other federal programs. So basically what happens is this is a gigantic kind of money laundering scheme and bribe scheme where the federal government takes money from us Texans. It creates these programs, but programs that it cannot implement itself because it doesn't have nearly enough people to do it. So what then it does is it sends that money back to Texas, pays Texas to then implement the federal program. So can you see where the scam goes on here? What would have happened if that $115 billion just actually never left the borders of Texas? It didn't go to Washington, D.C., where, of course, in reality, probably what went there was $150 billion, where, that are $35 billion was the skim off the top for whatever, grifters that are all connected to this money coming back to Texas. So they skim that off the top, and we get back 115 of a lot more than what we sent there. Just imagine if that money had stayed here, stayed in your pocket, stayed in my pocket, and allowed us to decide what we did with that money, rather than being forced to send it way out to Washington, D.C., to then be allocated back to us and then us told what to do with it. I'm imagining you would agree with me when I say that we are better stewards of our own money than Washington. No. I know that's a big leap to take here, but with them being $35 trillion in debt and the massive trillions of dollars a year in deficits, need I say any more? Just keep watching this Doge stuff going on in the Trump administration. So, us here at the Feed Bandit podcast, we advocate Texas above all else. Taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your community before doing anything else. And then your extended community being, your city, county, and state. And beyond that, there's really nothing else to bother your time with or worry about. We shouldn't be going beyond the borders of Texas, living here. And if that's the case, why even mess with anything going on with the federal government? Why participate in that giant charade, money laundering scam of a system? It just doesn't make sense anymore. So, once again, just a reminder: stay focused on your local, stay focused on your community. That's where your biggest impact will happen. And I promise you, every single government probably should have a Doge commission, if you will, where they'll find a lot of this wasteful stuff going on. And really, the big thrust going forward, we should all be asking ourselves at every level, really, what are we getting for the money that we're allowing to be stolen from us and spent by the higher levels of government? So I ask you, of the $115 billion that's coming back to us from Washington that is already stolen from us, what is that buying us? Are we getting our money's worth? Typically, when you invest in something, don't you expect to have a pretty decent return every year, not just a one-to-one return back to you? I spent $100 billion. I'd expect maybe to get 10% back a year. So, at least $110 billion a year on my, at least $10 billion, like a return on investment plus eventually getting my capital back. So it's just a gigantic swindle, gigantic scam. So just food for thought to keep in your mind. The comptroller did acknowledge once again that, if Texas were its own country, we'd be the 8th largest economy in the world. Think about that. The 8th largest economy in the world if Texas was its own nation. That alone says maybe we ought to start thinking about that again. And maybe we ought to consider, taking care of ourselves here and not connecting our destiny to 49 other states and trying to convince them to do the things that we want to do. Why don't we just take care of our home here? Be friendly with them, but we don't need to cinch our horses to that wagon, especially when that wagon being driven by Mordor, D.C., is about to go over the cliff. So anyway, just keep that in mind, food for thought, and that will do it for my Texas-centric commentary today. Let's move on to some more potpourri articles in the hunting space. All right, I found a couple of things of interest here that we coming from the Lone Star Outdoor News that that we love. So I wanted to read through a couple of these if you've missed them. Hopefully you get some value from them. First, though, I found this other article from Deer and Deer Hunting. Really quick, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, or know the history, but how the mule deer was discovered and named. None of this I knew. So the mule deer species dates back just 10,000 years to the last ice age. But did you know modern Americans knew nothing of it until relatively recently? It's true. The first description of the mule deer was written by Captain Meriwether Lewis on May 10th, 1805, about 8 months after the new, quote-unquote, new deer species was discovered by Lewis and Clark scout George Drouillard. Drouillard was a civilian interpreter, scout, hunter, and cartographer hired for Lewis and Clark's voyage of discovery to explore the territory of the Louisiana Purchase in 1804. He first spotted the strange-looking deer while hiking the cliffs of what is now Nebraska's Niobrara River region, allegedly in or near Niobrara County. In May 1805, Meriwether wrote about the deer after John Coulter bagged one of these curious kinds of deer for camp meat. After noticing the deer's immense size compared to a whitetail, Meriwether wrote an 800-word description in his diary. A small samplet of that is, quote, "The ear and the tail of this animal, when compared with those of the common deer, so well comported with those of the mule when compared with the horse, that we have, by way of distinction, adapted the appellation of the mule deer, which I think much more appropriate," he wrote. Well, there you have it. The founding and or discovery, I should say, and the founding of the mule deer. All right. Our first little article we're going to go through today is about public nilgai hunts. So I had not heard of this here, but maybe you have. But let's get through this and see what all the fuss is about. There are all sorts of extreme sports today, and for a group of hunters pursuing nilgai, sometimes hunting can be added to the list. The 3-day hunt took place at a unit of the Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge in eastern Cameron County, where the only firearms allowed were shotguns with slugs or muzzleloaders. The refuge topography consisted of several bays, coastal grasses, thorn scrub, yucca trees, mesquite, and huswash trees. Man, I always have a hard time pronouncing that. And plenty of catclaw acacia, sometimes called wait-a-minute bushes. A hunter described the vegetation as having every thorn one could imagine, each drawing blood upon contact. Another said the pinch of a yucca leaf results in a sharp pain, assuming it has some type of toxin. A group of 4 hunters went through a brutal yet rewarding ordeal as they harvested 5 nilgai cows during the December 13th through 15th hunt, possibly a record since the refuge opened the unit for hunting 3 years ago. Oh, it's only been open 3 years, okay. "It was a challenging hunt," said David Hoffman. "I would say I walked 20 miles through the weekend." Each hunter carried a backpack, a shooting stick or a tripod, a stool, and food and water. Another challenge was the shotgun or muzzleloader stipulation. A full-grown nilgai antelope cow can weigh around 300 pounds. Oh, wow. As an aside, I've seen them, I guess, but I've never obviously hunted one, and I've never eaten one, so I wonder what they taste like. If you have, let us know. Email us howdy@feedbandit.com and tell us all about it. Once harvested, the hunter's real work begins, as it's the hunter's responsibility to haul the meat to his or her truck, whether whole or quartered. Hoffman, Jeremiah Nicholas, and a third hunter opted to carry their bounty on a wheel cart or on their back in backpacks designed for this type of hunt. Nichols walked more than 400 yards to find a spot and got a nilgai sometime after 7:30 a.m. on the first day of the hunt. He didn't have to wait long, did he? He went back to the parking spot where he managed to borrow a cart from another hunter before returning to his hunting spot. After field dressing the nilgai, he put it on the cart and hauled the cargo back along a sandy and wet road. He struggled mightily, taking a break here and there until he reached his destination. Quote, "Makes it look like I actually did some work," he said after he was shown a picture of his ordeal. Yeah, I'll just say that reminds me of the times where, you think you have a good shot, pretty sure you nailed the deer, yet it still kind of runs off or runs into the thick trees or whatever, and then you got to go look for it. And once you find it, all of a sudden you're 100, 200 yards deep into the bush, and you can't get a Polaris or a buggy back there, so you got to drag it out of there. That uses some muscles that you're probably not used to if you're more of a office worker, and if you've done it before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For Hoffman, the story was different. Ironically, he shot his first of 2 nilgai at 20 yards, even though his muzzleloader was sighted in at 300 yards. I heard her walking from a muddy field, he said. She never saw me. I shot, and she ran about 25 yards away. Hoffman quartered the cow and put her inside a game bag, then inside a backpack, and walked a mile or more back to his truck. He harvested his second nilgai on the morning of the last hunt after taking a more anticipated 200-yard shot. This time, however, he walked farther than he did the first 2 days to find a spot. Fortunately, a buddy hauled half of the meat in his backpack to lighten Hoffman's load for the long trek. A third hunter harvested a cow on the same morning after walking several miles along a brushy area. He hauled more than 80 pounds of meat, also inside a backpack. On the way, the hunter was seen lying on his back off the side of his sendero as he caught his breath. 2 East Texas hunters brought their electric bikes for the trip, but they said they walked miles and miles since the e-bikes didn't go far on the muddy roadways. They went home empty-handed. Nevertheless, they saw plenty of animals and are glad to be selected to spend quality time in the South Texas bushland. Well, that's pretty cool. That might be something worth looking into. So that's a nilgai, the Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge in eastern Cameron County. All right, so I had never heard of that before, so that's maybe something you might be interested in. Take a look at it. All right, we had a couple of podcasts pretty recently, within the last 5 or so, about making a shot, thinking you either missed or you made a good shot, and the deer ran off, and you had to go find her or him. And it's just that feeling, when everything rushes through your mind of, oh shoot, did I really hit it? You think you did, or am I making myself believe I did? And then you start saying, well, maybe I didn't. And you start making yourself believe you didn't, but you're sitting there waiting 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour before getting out of your blind because you don't want to spook up the deer if he's laying down, right back there. So you're sitting there waiting, and the clocks tick about, a minute feels like 5 minutes, so that hour feels like forever, and you're waiting to get out. So this one is interesting, kind of along that line, but just another story to help you kind of, when you're in that position to think, okay, all right, we'll figure this out. So it's called Redemption After Failure. Hunter gets buck he arrowed in September. It was a day all deer hunters dread for Shane Nutt. On the opening weekend of archery season, he arrowed a buck but did not recover the deer. He was hunting on some family property outside Brenham in Washington County, and about 10 days later, game camera photos revealed that the buck was still alive. Well, that would make me feel a whole lot better. Now, you don't want to wound the deer or have the deer walking around, in pain or anything like that. But at least, you I guess in that scenario, your consolation is that, you didn't kill the deer and you just never found it, but its body was left out there to nature. No, I mean, that's the circle of life, of course, but you want to always recover that deer, obviously. Quote, I seriously thought I would never see the deer again. The unfortunate circumstance really let the wind out of my sails and gave me an awful feeling. When I figured out that he was still alive, I made it my mission to harvest him this season. Nutt got random trail camera photos of the deer during mid-October, but never actually saw the buck. He didn't see the buck or get any more game camera pictures of the deer for another 6 weeks. Quote, I honestly thought the buck had gotten sick and died from the wound, Nutt said. Then I had some friends tell me they had seen a big deer while driving by the property where I had been hunting. They didn't know what the deer looked like, so I was doubtful it was him. Nutt then had a video sent to him of a deer from a family friend, and the buck was in the video. Quote, "This individual lives near our family property," Nutt said. "He sent me the video of the buck and asked if I had been hunting in the area recently. I couldn't believe it." After that, Nutt started to get game camera photos of the buck on his family property. Quote, "I also had different people in the Burnham area tell me or call me on the phone and say they had been seeing the buck in various areas across the outskirts of town." Nutt said, "The deer seemed to be healthy and traveling all over the place. I assume because he was chasing does." So, makes you kind of wonder, did he actually hit the deer the first time? We'll find out, maybe. So, right after Thanksgiving, Nutt saw the deer in person, but never got a shot opportunity. He continued to hunt as much as possible, hoping he might get lucky. "I recently got pictures of him during the morning and evening hours, and made plans to pursue him," Nutt said. "I was prepared to hunt all day for him, and I set up a brush blind in the area where I had last seen him on the trail camera the day before." Nutt hunted through the morning and midday hours, but never saw the deer. At about 2:30 p.m., some does walked out, and then another doe came out by herself, and the buck he was chasing showed up right behind her. Oh my gosh, can you imagine the buck fever? Quote, he was at about 250 yards, and I took my shot with my .270 rifle," Nutt said. "The buck fell. I couldn't believe it. Everything in my life had taken a back seat to some degree as I persistently pursued this deer, and I was finally able to harvest him." The buck had a welt where his arrow had struck him. Okay, so he did hit him. And he actually found the portion of the arrow that had broken off inside the deer. Oh, wow. Deer are pretty tough. His redemption was complete. Quote, "It was a great example of how persistence pays off." Wow, well, there you go. Okay, see, that is another scenario where, hitting a deer, and he runs off, obviously doesn't kill him. And, being lucky and persistent and finding that deer and taking him again. Man, oh man. I know I would have felt it would have been pretty... I can't imagine his emotion once he saw it again and actually put it down. I can see like the levels, it's like the first time he shot, he was confident he arrowed it, but he couldn't recover it. Man, that would feel like crap. Then they saw it on camera, so it's like, okay, great, he's still alive. That's great. But then you're like, I hope he's not, in bad shape or anything like that. But he kept hearing reports. So it was like, okay, he's out there. All right, so this deer's got 9 lives, and then he finally takes it. Wow, what a story! And the picture of the deer is really cool too. So I hope he's getting that shoulder mounted. I'm sure he is. All right, the last article on here is a feel-good article dealing with one of the big things we try to talk about a lot, and we do with our own family, is getting young hunters out in the field. And this one kind of goes to show, it's never too early. I mean, maybe when they're less than 1 or, they're in that completely incapable phase. But after that, wow. So this one's the youngest, most successful hunter. In the heart of Georgia West lives a precocious shooter who's only 3 years and 4 months old. His name is Fisher Creech, and he's currently leading the youth division, which is the youngest, most successful hunter boys category in the Muy Grande deer contest. His parents, Michael and Krista Creech, probably Creech. I'm sorry, guys, if I'm totally, totally obliterating your name. I really apologize. Operate a youth hunting and fishing ministry called Kingdom Hunters, with the motto, "On the hunt to advance God's kingdom." Quote, "A big part of this is to get kids outdoors so they can hear from God," Michael said. "I think it's the greatest thing because it allows you to have a good and quiet place to get away from the world and distractions." Michael said he works with youth constantly, and one day Fisher approached him wanting to shoot a deer. I do not ever put anyone in a blind that does not have the passion," and Fisher took to it like duck to water. "I worked with him a couple times, and he picked it up instantly." Although this was not Fisher's first hunt, nerves slightly started to hit him, but Michael said at the moment he knew exactly what to do. Quote, he has hunted before and did not have any problems, but this particular hunt made him nervous. Well, yeah. So I decided to say a prayer with him, he said. Next thing you know, like nothing, he overcame his fears and is now leading as the youngest, most successful hunter. Michael proudly said Fisher listened to his commands and showed a superior amount of discipline at such a young age. I was really happy, Fisher said. It's fun, and I can eat it. Well, that's great. That is awesome. We, Feed Bandit, me, Corn Bandit, and all of our buddies, we take our kids out there as soon as we possibly can, which, per this kid, we waited too late with all of our children. My son is 7. I guess, I know I probably should have, I'm about a year or two late, I guess, getting him at least on the gun. He's been sitting with me in deer blind since he was 3. But I need to get him starting to really start shooting. They were just, even the youth ones were a little long for him. But this year we're going to really start doing that. It'll be fun to get him involved. My daughter's 4. She'll be 5 actually on March 2nd, Texas Independence Day. And I'm going to get her on that too starting this summer. So it'll be pretty fun to really get them involved and really excited to start doing this stuff. If you got your kids, always obviously take them out there. I cannot wait actually to really be kind of more the guide going forward. I mean, of course I'm going to continue to hunt myself. However, gosh, I just see it when my buddies are hunt with their kids and their kids shoot something, the joy in their faces. So I can't wait to experience that as well. That's going to be a really fun time. And with that, that's probably the last article I'll go over in this episode. I hope you found all those things interesting. Remember, just whenever you're watching the news or listening to the news and they're telling you something, always kind of put it through the filter of how does that benefit me as a Texan here in Texas? Because, most news when they talk about government is about what the federal government's doing. Put it through that filter. It'll keep your mind right, keep your mind straight about how most everything it does is actually detrimental to us here. Keep working with kids out in the field. That's what makes it fun. That's what keeps this sport and this tradition going. That's how we preserve our tradition and protect our legacy, as we like to say, is through the youth, getting the youth out in the field, hunting in the outdoors, and all the stuff that goes with that. Really fun. And if you're interested in nilgai, look up that hunt. You might be able to grab one for yourself next year or later this year, depending on when those hunts are. So with that, and last reminder, check out our gear and apparel section on our website, feedbandit.com. We have a bunch of our new shirt designs out there, polos. They're the hunting camp polos, really cool. We have our Texas Pride Camp polos that have a lot of Texas history in them. Those are really cool. And then our Rebel Camp polos, which really make a statement saying enough is enough, Texas, and Texas above all else, basically. So take a look at those. Hopefully you'll find them of interest, and hopefully you'll buy one or 10. We'd really appreciate it. And with that, I'll leave you on this podcast and talk to you on the next one. Remember, support your local feed store and all those small businesses around your land that are there for you when you need them. All right. I appreciate it, and take care. Have a good one.
Well, I hope the Bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Anna. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the Bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition. Protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.